Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing the Curt Class 1 trailer hitch on a 2019 Fiat 500. Now this is what it's going to look like when it's installed, and it is an exposed cross tube here, so you can see a portion of the hitch. And overall though, it's tucked pretty well back in there, and even the receiver tube opening doesn't protrude too much, so it does still give it a pretty clean look while still getting the usability of the hitch. Now being a Class 1, this is going to be an 1.25 inch, so when choosing your accessories, you're going to want to make sure that you select 1.25 inch for that shank size. You are going to be a little bit more limited as far as accessories than a normal 2 inch, but I also have a smaller vehicle and I'm limited to just an 1.25 inch, so there's definitely options out there. Just make sure that you're picking the right ones and that it's going to fit your hitch. Now when putting those accessories in place, you're going to want to keep those in place with a 1/2 inch pin and clip. And the hitch doesn't come with the pin and clip. A lot of your accessories, when you buy those, they're going to come with it. But if you want to pick up a locking one, that way when you put your accessories in, you can lock it in place. It's going to stay on the vehicle. We have plenty of those available here at eTrailer. Now, if you do plan on towing, you do have a plate style safety chain loop here, so you can get your normal hooks on there, no problem. And even a larger clevis style, you can get on there with pretty ease. So, you know, when you are hooking up to the trailer, you'll be able to latch that up nice and easy. Now, when it does come to towing, you do want to adhere to the weight capacities of the hitch and the vehicle. And this one comes in relatively low because it's Class 1, and really the car's not designed to be towing a whole lot. But for maybe a jet ski or a small garden tractor or something along those lines, this will work fine. And the gross trailer weight rating is going to be 2,000 pounds, and that's going to be the weight of the trailer plus the accessories loaded on there. Now, you do have a tongue weight rating of 200 pounds, so some of your bike racks, cargo carriers, or anything that's suspended, you're not going to want to go over that 200 pounds. So that's going to be not only the accessory, but what's loaded on there. So just make sure you stay under that 200 pounds. You're also going to want to check the vehicle's owner's manual to see what it's capable of towing before just hooking up to that trailer. Compare that with the 2,000 pounds here and take the lower of those two numbers so you stay safe. When choosing accessories, it's nice to know the distance from the pinhole here to the furthest point of the rear fascia, and that way you can determine what ball mount you may need, or even some of your folding bike racks or cargo carriers. You want to make sure you don't hit the rear fascia, and this one's coming in at about 3.5 inches, so it sticks out farther enough that you shouldn't have any issues there. Now, as far as ground clearance, it is pretty low here, so it's right at about 10 inches. So I really don't worry about the hitch making contact with the ground, as it sits about level with the muffler. But when you do have those accessories loaded on, as you go up those inclines, they can bottom out. So just keep that in mind when going over any bumps or if you're going up any inclines. Now, as far as installation goes on this hitch, it's actually not too bad. You are going to be trimming this center portion of the rear fascia if you have the turbo model, and that's just to gain clearance for that receiver tube opening. If you have a non-turbo one, no worries there. You are going to be needing to drop the muffler, and also if your car has a spare tire or a heat shield, there's a little bit that goes with that as well. Ours did not have that, but overall it's really just going to be 4 bolts that are going to bolt this up, so it's not terribly hard to do. You are going to want to jack this up just to give you a little bit more clearance, but it can be done in your driveway or garage pretty easily in about, I'd say, 45 minutes or so. Sometimes it's helpful to have an extra set of hands to get that hitch up in place. But as far as the installation, I'm going to walk you through every step so you can get your hitch installed. Now, to begin our installation, we're going to need to drop the muffler down, and that's going to give us access to be able to get our hardware in place. And we're going to need to enlarge a hole to get the hardware in. So having that muffler drop down is going to just give us more room to work with. Now, sometimes these can get tricky on the isolators, and really all we're doing is prying this rubber off, but because over time they can kind of just start to adhere to that metal, they can be a little bit tricky. So to help it along, I'm just going to spray some silicone spray here. You can also use soapy water or even a penetrating oil. Now, there's going to be one on the other side as well. Now, to get this off, I'm using a pry bar. You can use a flathead screwdriver or something along those lines, but pretty much we're just going to put pressure here. Now, this is pretty tight, so you may have to kind of push the muffler forward just to get that to drop, and then we'll go ahead and get the isolator on the other side. And you can see the isolator on this side. Now that I have it removed, it's a little easier to see, but same thing, you can kind of just use this exhaust hanger here to kind of use as leverage to pry that off. Now, if you have a heat shield, you're also going to want to go ahead and remove that. Ours does not have one. And also, if you have a spare tire, you're also going to want to remove that as well. Now ours obviously doesn't have one, so we're going to move right along by going to our frame rails here. So we're going to have these protective foils here, and this is protecting our weld nuts. So it's kind of nice. Generally, weld nuts are kind of exposed and you can get rust and corrosion build up over time just from the elements, but these stickers do protect these. It keeps those threads nice and clean. So go ahead and remove those. And we're also going to be taking off our square rubber plug on both sides. So there's going to be one on this side of the frame rail and one on the other. Now we're going to need to enlarge this hole here, and our larger carriage bolts are going to pass through here and then here. So we need to make sure that this is large enough to pass through. So I would keep this handy. I'm going to use a 7/16 drill bit to enlarge this and then just test fit to make sure that this is able to pass through there while drilling out. Now this may be tricky with a drill bit just because it's going to get pretty long here. And I have a right angle drill and it's still pretty tight here above the muffler. So I'm using a step bit and I'm just going to slowly enlarge the hole and then again just test fit with that hardware until it's the proper size. And we'll just make this a little bit larger. Now, if you are using just a standard drill bit, you could probably go in at a slight angle. The main thing is this needs to pass through, and it's gonna have a spacer block, but you wanna make sure that it's not enlarged too much to where it's gonna go side by side, but it does not have to be a perfectly drilled hole. Just make sure that you can get that to pass through without being too terribly large. And once we know that we can pass this through, we are good to go. So we're gonna go ahead and get our fish wire and our spacer blocks and get this hardware put into place. And the way this works with a fish wire, it's actually pretty easy. If you've never done this before, just follow along and you'll be able to knock this out no problem. So take that coiled end and feed it over towards this square access hole, and you're gonna wanna catch that little coiled end here. From there, we can take our spacer block and just feed this in. And then we're just going to take our carriage bolt and just thread this onto the coiled portion. We can then go ahead and feed this in as well, and then just kind of jostle this around until we get that stud to poke through. We're going to go ahead and do the same technique here. Now this car had a different hitch installed previously, so the center section was already cut out, but I am going to show you on the other portion of the rear diffuser. Now this is only on the turboed models, so if you don't have the turbo model you don't have to worry about it, but this is going to give us that clearance for the hitch. And what you're going to do is measure 3 inches back, and then I just go ahead and use a tape line to kind of mark where I need to cut. It just makes it a little bit easier visually to see and get those nice clean lines. And really all you're going to do is go perfectly horizontal back. So again, with my tape, I'll just kind of mark this out. And so just go from this top corner, make a nice straight line. And that's going to give you this shape here. So you can repeat that step with the tape on the other side. And then I use an oscillating tool to cut this out. You can use a Dremel or any really cutting device that you may have. But once you cut that out, you're going to want to go back with a file or the flat blade of a knife just to kind of get the burrs off, just to kind of clean it up a little. So once you go ahead and get that cut out, then we can get ready to put our hitch up in place. Now to get the hitch in place, it's going to be pretty easy. We can use the muffler to kind of rest it on there. And what I'm going to do just to kind of, again, support this, if you're doing this one person, this is probably the easiest way I would say to do it. But have your hardware ready. So what I have is our small bolt here and a conical tooth washer. So what I'm going to do is just kind of align one of these holes. It does not matter which one, but just to kind of get a few threads started. And then this side of the hitch will at least be supported. And that's going to allow us to get the other ones in place a lot easier. Now on this side, you're going to take those fish wire end of the wires here, and you're going to just pass them through the corresponding holes. So just kind of run these through and pull the slack out. Do the same on the front. And this is going to help kind of guide it in. And also these wires, you're going to want to keep them attached until we have those studs poking out. Main reason being is if that falls back in the frame rail, you're going to have to kind of get those back out of the access hole and then re-fish wire through. So this kind of just allows these to stay in place. So what we'll do is once this is aligned, kind of jostle this around. You can pull the fish wire off or you can uncoil it. It's kind of up to you. And then we'll take our flange nut here and again, be careful not to push it up in the frame rail. So if you can use the hitch to kind of put pressure on it, that's a good way to do it. That way you can at least get a few threads started. And now we have both sides supported. So we can go ahead and just repeat the same steps for the flange nut here, as well as the bolt on this side, and just get those hand tightened in place for now. So now we're gonna head and tighten these up. Now on the ones that we fish wired through, we're gonna be using an 11/16 socket, and we're gonna be coming back with a torque wrench to torque them properly. So we really don't need to crank them down. We just wanna snug up the hitch a little bit. So we'll go ahead and get these zipped up. Now on the passenger side, it's going to be a 13 millimeter, so we'll go ahead and get these tightened down as well. Now if you've tightened it down and you realize this is a little bit offset, all the holes are slotted. So what I've actually done is just loosen them up just a bit, and I took a rubber mallet and kind of smacked this along to center it up. It's going to aesthetically look a lot better. You also want to make sure that this is flush as well. You don't want your hitch to be crooked and have your bike rack off to the side a little bit. So just a little bit of maneuvering there with the hammer is going to get that dialed in, and then you can go ahead and re-tighten that back up. So now I'm going to go back with my torque wrench, and I got the torque values from the instruction manual, and the smaller bolts here are going to have a different torque setting than the larger carriage bolts. So just make sure that you dial this in accordingly. Now, if you need a torque wrench, we have them available here at eTrailer. You can generally rent them at an auto parts store, but this is going to be important. It's going to make sure that we don't put too much stress on the threads and cause them to break, or long-term just put stress on the threads. But also it's going to make sure that it's tight enough and not become loose over time. So go through and just check your instruction manual for those torque settings and go through and just tighten these down, make sure they're torqued properly, and that should pretty much about do it. Our hitch is officially installed after we've torqued those down. All that's left to do before using our hitch and hitting the road is getting those isolators back on. So just as we pop them off, it's gonna be a little bit easier to probably get them on. You can reapply some of that spray if you need to, but we'll just pop those in, get the exhaust up, and then we can start using this. And that was a look and installation of the Curt Class 1 Trailer Hitch Receiver on a 2019 Fiat 500.